Most people believe love is something you fall into, but the real truth is, love is something you practice every single day on purpose with someone who chooses to stay. You don't attract the wrong people by being unlucky. You attract them by not yet knowing you're worth the right ones. And if you've ever caught yourself wondering, why does this keep happening? Is this just what long-term relationships feel like? Do I still love them, or have I just gotten used to them? You're not failing at love. You're just in the part that requires more of you. Here's the thing. Most people in relationships think the problem is compatibility. But the real truth is, two people can want the exact same thing and still feel like they're speaking different languages, because their nervous systems learned different rules about how safe connection works. Your partner's nervous system is reading you before their mind can catch up. And that changes everything about what you need to do differently. So let's get into it. Point 1. The walls are the warning. Most couples think the walls go up because one partner stopped caring. But the real truth is, the walls go up because someone underneath the surface is trying to protect themselves from being hurt again. And here's what nobody explains. What looks like emotional unavailability is usually someone who learned very early that closeness came with a cost. They learned that showing up fully meant getting rejected. So they stopped trying, not because they don't want connection, but because somewhere along the way, connection became too expensive. Most people in relationships respond to withdrawal with more pressure, more questions, more need. But when you do that, her nervous system reads it as danger, not safety, and the walls only go higher. But here's what changes everything. You stop trying to get through the wall, and you start creating a moment where the person behind it feels safe enough to come forward on their own. And here's the one most people never figure out. You do that not with words, but with presence. You do that by being the kind of person who doesn't flinch when someone pulls back, who stays steady when things get hard, who doesn't need them to come back faster than they're ready to. And when you do that, something in her is quietly registering, he actually heard me this time. He didn't need me to be okay for him to stay. And that's when the walls between you start to come down without either of you having to say a word. Point 2. The cycle is the problem, not the person. Most people in relationships think the problem is their partner, the way they shut down, the way they criticize, the way they need more closeness than feels manageable. But the real truth is, what you're seeing is a pattern that was already running before either of you showed up. Your nervous system learned rules, their nervous system learned rules. And now, those rules are playing out in every fight that feels like it came out of nowhere. Here's the part no one talks about. The anxious avoidance cycle isn't a sign of incompatibility. It's a sign that both people actually want the same thing: connection, safety, to be chosen, but they learned different ways to get it. One of you learned that getting close means losing yourself. The other learned that getting close means losing control. So you pull, and they pull away. And that pull and retreat dynamic feels like proof that it can't work. But it isn't proof. It's just two scared people who don't yet know how to stay in the same room without running. Not louder conversations, not more compromising, not scheduled date nights, but two people who actually feel safe enough to be honest with each other for the first time in years. And here's what changes everything. You stop trying to fix the pattern from the outside. And you start becoming the kind of person who can stay present in your own discomfort long enough for the cycle to break. That's when your partner stops feeling like a problem to manage and starts feeling like a person to come home to. Point 3. Curiosity is the antidote to contempt. Most couples think contempt comes from anger, but the real truth is, contempt comes from certainty. When you're certain you know exactly what your partner meant, exactly why they did it, exactly who they are at their core, that's when the eye roll shows up, the sarcasm, the dismissal. Because certainty closes the door, and curiosity opens it. And here's what nobody explains. Your nervous system in a conflict is like a smoke detector. It cannot tell the difference between your partner raising their voice and actual danger. So it sounds the alarm regardless. And that alarm is what's hijacking your connection before you even realize it. Your brain stops looking for understanding and starts looking for evidence that you're right. But here's what changes everything. You start asking one question instead of making one statement. You shift from, "You're always like this," to, "What is it like for you right now?" And something in him is saying, "She doesn't need me to fix this. She just needs me to stay." That's the shift that turns a relationship that feels like a negotiation into one that feels like a refuge. Point 4. Emotional availability isn't a personality trait. It's a practice. Most people think some people are just emotionally available and some people aren't. But the real truth is, emotional availability is something you practice, like a muscle that gets stronger the more you use it. And the way you practice it is in the 30-second moments when you choose to stay present instead of retreating. Most couples wait for the big moments to prove connection. The anniversary trip, the deep conversation on a Saturday morning. But the real building happens in the small ones. The moment she shares something vulnerable and you don't try to solve it. The moment he pulls back and you don't chase. The moment you feel yourself wanting to shut down and instead you say, "I'm not sure what's happening in me right now, but I want to stay with this." And what moves through her is, "I forgot how good it feels to be chosen without having to earn it." That's when safety enters the relationship, and the love doesn't just continue, it expands. Point 5. Repair is more important than being right. Most couples think the goal of a fight is to win, or at least to not lose. But the real truth is, every fight is an opportunity to either damage the relationship or repair it. And the difference isn't who was right. The difference is who steps toward repair first. And here's the part no one talks about. Criticism always feels like rejection to the person receiving it, even when it's delivered calmly. Because underneath the complaint is a longing, a need, a version of them that wants something and doesn't know how to ask for it directly. And when you hear the criticism as rejection, you defend. And when you defend, they escalate. And before you know it, you're in a full pattern that neither of you intended. But here's what changes everything. You stop listening to what they're saying and start listening for what they're feeling underneath it. And you say that out loud. You say, "It sounds like you're feeling really unheard right now, and I want to understand that better." And that sentence alone can interrupt a cycle that was about to go dark. This isn't a communication hack. This is just what two emotionally mature people naturally do. They don't just fight, they come back. And the coming back is where the real intimacy lives. Point 6. Drift is the enemy, not drama. Most people watch for the big betrayals, the affair, the lie, the dramatic exit. But the real truth is, most relationships don't die in an explosion. They die in a slow fade. They drift because no one chose to stop drifting. And here's what nobody explains. Drift happens so gradually that by the time you notice it, you've already been living parallel lives for months. You stop telling each other the small things. You stop turning toward the small moments. And then one day, you look up and realize, we're roommates. We're co-parents. But we're not partners anymore. And that's the thing about drift. It feels safe because there's no conflict, there's no friction, but there's also no connection. And underneath that quiet distance, both people are slowly suffocating. But here's what changes everything. You make a decision, not a dramatic one, just a quiet, committed decision to turn toward each other again, to ask the question you stopped asking, to lean in when you could pull back, to choose presence over comfort, over and over, until the drift reverses itself. And when you do, something in both of you starts remembering why you chose this in the first place. That's the shift from living in the same house to actually being in the same relationship. Point 7. You have to become it before you can attract it. Most people think the goal is to find the right person. But the real truth is, the goal is to become the kind of person who can stay, who can be present in the hard moments without running, who can hold space for their partner's mess without needing them to be perfect first. And here's the part no one talks about. You don't attract the version of love you're not yet capable of holding, not because you're not worthy, but because your nervous system keeps pulling you back toward what you know, even when what you know is painful, even when what you know isn't working, because familiar feels safer than unfamiliar, even when familiar is making you miserable. But here's what changes everything. You stop waiting to be ready, and you start doing the work before you feel ready. You start showing up differently in your current relationship, even when it feels awkward, even when your partner doesn't immediately respond. You start becoming secure, grounded, curious, resilient, and real, not because you have it all figured out, but because you're willing to keep learning. And when you do that, everything changes, not because the other person changed, but because you did. This isn't a checklist. It's an invitation to show up differently, and that changes everything about what's possible between you and the person you chose. When you internalize this, you stop reacting and start responding, and your partner will feel the difference before you've even said a word. Real intimacy doesn't start when you find the right person. It starts when you decide to become the kind of person who can stay.